Hi friends, it's Chari. Today I'm creating a big beautiful Mother's Day card using lots of die cut flowers to make a beautiful bouquet. For this card I'll be using the watering can and the lovely lily of the valley, as well as darling daffodils and the spring sprig. I will also be pulling in the lucky clovers dies as well. And for my background, I'm using a piece of favorite flannel. This is the 12 by 12 hot toddy paper, and I'm cutting this to 5 inches by 7 inches. So I am making a 5 by 7 card today. I felt like I needed a large canvas to hold all of these beautiful blossoms that I am putting in my bouquet. I'm also cutting a piece of paper bag cardstock to 5 inches by 2 inches. This will be the ground for my bottom. And before I die cut this, I want to stamp my sentiment that says love ya. This is from the big Scripty Words stamp set. And I'm stamping this in some soot ink. My idea for the sentiment was to kind of make it look like it's blended or kind of camouflaged in the ground or in the dirt at the bottom. So I've stamped my sentiment along the bottom, and then I'm going to use one of the simple wavy borders to cut the top. Now I'll tell you right now, I messed up, and this is actually upside down, but I didn't notice it quite yet. So you can see my stitching detail is on that piece that I'm going to toss aside. Now I wanted to mask off the sentiment so that when I do some inking and some splattering on this dirt, I don't get those on my sentiment. So I'm using a piece of masking paper. So this is just a low tack sticky paper. I cut it with the coordinating die, and I'm just pulling off that liner paper on the back. And this gives me a little mask to put right over my sentiment. Now that stamping is protected, and you're going to see that it's going to create a cool little shadow around it as well as I add the ink blending. I'm starting out with some vintage photo ink, and I will add some darkness to this dirt and kind of make it a little less uniform in color. So I'm starting at the top edge, and here's about where I realize that, hey, this doesn't have the stitching detail on it. So I'm going to grab my die, and I'm going to line it back up with the stitching in the right place this time, and then I'll run this through my die cut machine, and now we have stitching. Okay, crisis averted. Now I can get back to the ink blending. So I'm using that vintage photo first and kind of going all over the top. I'm pulling it down onto the sentiment. You can see how it shows up on that masking paper a little bit. And I'm just kind of coloring all around. So lighter at the bottom, darker at the top. And then I also pulled in the scorched timber, which is a dark kind of grayish brown. And I'm going to do the sides and along the top just a little bit. Now I have the scorched timber distress oxide, so it has that kind of pigment property. And I'm going to do some splatters with this. So I'm adding some water. And I'll just pick this up with my paintbrush and add some splatters of this ink. Now, because I added the water, we're going to get that cool oxidation look from the Distress Oxide, and that pigment is going to kind of pull out of that ink. So it's going to have like a chalky, dark brown look to it. And then also I'm adding some white watercolor splatters as well, so that I have two different colors of splatters in my soil. So now that I have all of that inking and splattering done, I'm just cleaning up my work surface so I don't make a mess. And I'm going to use my tweezers and start to pull off that masking paper. I did have to pull it in a couple pulls, I think because it's a little damp from the ink that I blended over top. It kind of tore a little bit, but it is low tack, so it's not really stuck down. It just needs to be kind of picked off a little bit. And once I have that off, you can see how we have this kind of cool look with like a shadow around that sentiment. Now to add some ink blending to my die cut. So first I'm starting out with the Lucky Clovers, and I cut these from some Cilantro cardstock, and I'm using a really small ink blending brush and some Lucky Clover Distress ink to add some shading and some darker green to these clovers. I've cut out 2 of the smallest ones and 2 of the next smallest ones because I thought those sizes fit better with the composition that I will be making on this card. Now for my lovely lily of the valley, I cut all of the blooms out of white, and I'm just adding a little dusting of ballet slipper ink to the tops of them. So again, I'm using a really small blending brush and I'm being very careful just to add a little dusting of pink to the top and give them some shading so that they don't look so flat white. I did ink enough to make 3 sprigs of the lovely lily of the valley, but I only ended up using 2 in my project today. Next up, I'm moving on to my daffodils, and I cut these petals from some sticky note cardstock. I'm using a small brush to blend some peach fuzz ink from the centers out towards the edges about halfway. Now these two will stack together, and I added a little bit to the center, and you're going to see here in a bit I am going to go all over that centerpiece with this Peachy Keen ink as well. For the individual petals, that's for a little bloom, but I only really need 3 of those. So you see when I stack these together, that center seems to blend a little bit too much. So I'm going in with the Peachy Keen all over that centerpiece, which was cut from some sunflower cardstock. And then now it stands out just a little bit more. These are the leaves from the lovely lily of the valley, and I'm just adding a little bit of rustic wilderness shading to the outside edge of them so they're not so flat either. And then for my watering can, this is cut from some apricot cardstock, and I'm just adding a light dusting of that Peachy Keen to the bottom and the side. This just kind of gives it a little bit of shading. Now that I've ink blended all the pieces, I can start to assemble some things. So I'll start by going ahead and putting my ground, all those splatters are nice and dry, and I'm putting this on the bottom of that 5x7 piece of pattern paper. Now I have to assemble all of these flowers, so lots of assembling going on. I feel like I'm working in a florist shop here with all of these die cuts sitting in these little trays. So for my daffodil, I'm going to stack those 2 trios of petals right with a glue dot in the center, then the centerpiece, also these other little centers that stack on top. And so that little one that looks like a star shape, I cut that from fake tan, and the very center is cut from canned pumpkin cardstock. Now for the little bloom, I'm layering 2 of those petals together with that little base. And the base, the stems, and the leaves for the daffodils were all cut from algae cardstock. So I have a couple different greens going on in my bouquet. I did not want all of the greens to match exactly. Now for the lovely lily of the valley, I have these stems here cut from some noble fir cardstock. Again, I'm using lots of different greens so that not everything is matchy and it looks like a real bouquet. And I just put a little dot of glue on those little circles on the stem, and I'm just dropping my blooms into place. I do want to add the stem to my daffodils, so I'll pull those out as well and add some glue to that big circle. And then I'm adding one of these to the open daffodil, and I will add the other one to the closed daffodil. This die set cuts both of the stems at once, so you get one that curves in both directions. And then of course for my watering can, there is a little piece in that die set that layers behind the holes in the watering can, and I just cut that from some narwhal cardstock, so we have that gray color showing through those holes. Now this is the spring sprig, and I just thought that this would be a fun die to pull in for like a smaller pop of color in my bouquet, and that is exactly what I'm doing here. I cut 2 of the sprigs from some cilantro cardstock. So these are different than the clovers because remember I inked the clovers in the beginning, so now I have a different color of green. And then I thought that the purple flowers would be perfect. I'm sure that there is a flower that looks exactly like this. I do not know what it's called. I am not much of a gardener. I just like all the pretty colors of flowers. So I'm making 2 sprigs. I only ended up using 1 in my bouquet and then tucking 1 behind my watering can, but I kind of made all these not really sure what I wanted to do, but I figured more flowers, the better. Now we have the little tools from the watering can set, cut from narwhal cardstock, and then I used one of the textured browns for the handles. And then there's this cute little seed packet, which I cut from speckled eggshell cardstock, and I added the little flap. And then I have a guava heart that I'm adding to it. I did think about stamping the little vegetables from Veggie Happy, but I like the idea of all of this being die cuts on this card. Now I'm going to grab my brush that I used to add the brown to the soil and just dust the edges just a little bit with that brown so it tones down that speckled eggshell a little bit. So I played with my flowers and kind of figured out the placement that I wanted for this bouquet. I took a picture with my phone. This is my little trick. And then now I can pull the flowers out and reference the picture to remember where I put all these. So I have those dark leaves from the lovely lily of the valley with that shading from the distress ink. I have these beautiful daffodils. Then I only ended up using 2 of the lovely lily of the valley sprigs because the third one just was a little bit too much. I also have the little thin leaves from the daffodils. Those are great for filling this in. And you're going to see me layer one behind here in a little bit. And for the sprig, since it wasn't on like a stem, I'm just going to tuck this down towards the bottom, but I really like the way that looked. And then of course, I really like the idea of kind of tucking one of these clovers into the watering can as well. Now I'm making a couple adjustments here with the height of my flowers. I did lay it on my card base, which I wish I'd done before my glue got too set, and I actually took my tweezers and kind of pulled the daffodil down a little bit because it was a little tall. But once I made those adjustments, this is just laying on my card for placement, and I'm going to tuck this other spring sprig behind my watering can. And then I also have all these other clovers that I inked earlier. And the whole idea at the beginning was to kind of decorate those around on the ground. Now I put foam adhesive all over the back of this and realized I forgot something that I really wanted to do to the watering can. And that was to add some jute twine wrapped around it. So I have a long piece here, and you do have to kind of thread it through the handle of the watering can in order to wrap it around. So I did that and wrapped it around about 3 times. And then you're going to see me kind of adjust the placement. It's easier to kind of get it around and then adjust where you want it. So I'm pushing it up and shifting it to where it ends up between those 2 stitch detail lines. And because I kind of want it to curve like the curve of the watering can, I'm going to put a little bit of glue here to hold it in place and hold it with my reverse tweezers. This way it's not straight across, so you know when you pull something taut and it goes nice and straight, I want it to look like it's tied around something that is round. So I'm just using that glue to make that happen. Then I'm tying it in a bow. And I am tying this upside down because for some reason my bows look better when I tie them upside down. Not sure why. Then I can just trim off the ends, and then I really like the look. This kind of finishes off this bouquet of flowers. Now I can pull off all that liner paper for all of that foam adhesive that I put all over the back of those and pop this on to the card and make sure that's nice and stuck down. Now I can add the rest of my little die cut embellishment pieces. I love this little seed packet. I think it is so cute. And I thought that was a good way to kind of break up the big colorful piece of the watering can, to add all these things in front of it like it's a little display. Then I have my little rake, and I've added some foam to the handle, and then I'll just have this overlap the spout of the watering can like it's been leaned up against, and I just glued the end of the rake directly to the background. Now I can tuck this little clover behind it, kind of like it's growing out of the ground because this one has a stem. And then I have another of the smallest clovers, and you're going to see I layered it on top of the seed packet first, but this was kind of hanging out in the air because there's like 2 layers of foam for this seed packet, so I ended up tucking it behind. And then finally we have the spade that I will put on the left side there, kind of overlapping onto the watering can. So I'll add foam to the head of the spade, and then we'll glue this directly to the watering can there. And then all of the main composition is complete. And I just think that this turned out so pretty. This is a lot of die cuts for me. It's not something I normally do, but I really like how it turned out. For the rake and the spade, I am adding some little white gel pen details. And then now I need to make my card base. And I like to make top folding cards. So I need to do a little bit of construction for a top folding 5x7. So I took an 8.5 by 11, cut it into two pieces that are 5 inches by 8.5. And then this one I will cut down to 7. So I have one piece that's 5 inches by 7 inches and one piece that's 5 inches by 8.5. And then I will take that larger one and score it at 1.5 inches, creating that score line to where I have one side that's 7 and one side that's 1.5. I'll just enforce that fold. And then what I'm going to do is add some double-sided adhesive because this is stronger than a tape runner in my opinion. I'm just adding some strips of this across that smaller piece. I'm going to burnish them down really well, remove that liner paper, and adhere this to the other side. And this will be on the inside of my card so you won't see it. Well, you will see it when you open the card, but it'll be on the back side of the front. And now we have a top folding 5x7 card. So now I can add this panel that I worked so hard on arranging that beautiful bouquet to the front. And by the way, I did use 100-pound cardstock for this card base because this front has a lot of die cuts on it and it's kind of heavy, and I wanted this big card to hold up and be nice and sturdy. Now I added some glue to this little spring sprig because it was kind of hanging out there. So I'm tacking that down with some glue. I also decided to add a few more flowers since I had some just sitting there unused. And I'll hold that in place with a block while that glue kind of sets to hold that piece down. And then, of course, you know I love some little hearts on a card. So I cut out some hearts from the Hearts and Stars skinny tag die with Guava Cardstock, and I'm just sprinkling those around because I think little pink hearts are the perfect finishing touch to a card. I also really like this final little heart that I added to the watering can. I think it really helped finish off that kind of big area where there wasn't anything. And then I used Henry's Jr.'s Build a Sentiment Spring to add the sentiment Happy Mother's Day to the inside. And of course, we need some glitter on all these beautiful flowers. So I'm adding my stickles to the hearts, to the flower petals on the lily of the valley, and a little bit at the base of that daffodil. I'll add some to the center of that open daffodil, and then of course I added just a little smidge of glitter to all of those little purple flowers. And then of course we can't forget that big heart on our seed packet because we're going to sprinkle love out of that seed packet. And then here is my finished card. I love the way it turned out. I'm really glad that I decided to make a 5x7 card so I could put all these die cuts on it. This is kind of out of the norm for me, but I really had fun creating this bouquet. So I hope this has inspired you to pull out all those die cuts and mix them together and make something big and beautiful. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.